Sometimes life doesn't ask permission before it changes everything you thought you knew about yourself. Stella Steele Archer spent decades in Wyoming's mountains, building a life from nothing but grit and determination, until the day she had no choice but to walk away from it all. She took a job as a guard at Grimstone Penitentiary, known worldwide as the most dangerous prison on earth. Inside those walls, killers and corrupt officers played by rules she'd never imagined. Joaquín the executioner Ramirez, a cartel leader whose reputation made hardened guards nervous, seemed to hold secrets about the prison itself. Warden Paul Donnelly ran things his own way, and that way wasn't clean. Stella realized fast that surviving the inmates was only half the battle. The real danger came from the system protecting its own darkness. What was everyone at Grimstone so desperate to keep hidden? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The compass had belonged to her father. Sterling silver, engraved with his initials on the back, JTA, for James Thomas Archer. Stella held it in her palm as the Greyhound bus rattled eastward, away from the only home she'd ever known. Through the dusty window, Wyoming's mountains grew smaller with each passing mile, their peaks catching the late afternoon sun like they were on fire. She'd watched those mountains every morning of her 43 years, knew their moods better than most people knew their own families. Her father had taught her to read the land, how to track elk through fresh snow, how to find water when the creeks ran dry, how to survive when the temperature dropped to 20 below and the wind cut through you like a knife. He'd been a man of few words, but deep convictions. A decorated army ranger who'd come home from 3 tours and wanted nothing more than to raise cattle and a daughter in peace. He'd given her the compass on her 16th birthday, told her it had saved his life twice in combat. "A good compass always points true," he'd said. "No matter how lost you get, it'll show you the way home." She hadn't been home in 3 weeks now. Hadn't been back since the bank foreclosed on the ranch, since the creditors took everything, except what she could fit in 2 duffel bags. 43 years of life reduced to clothes, a few photographs, and her father's compass. The ranch had been in the Archer family for 4 generations. Her great-grandfather had homesteaded that land, built the original cabin with his own hands. Her grandfather had expanded it, added the barn and the corral. Her father had modernized it, put in proper plumbing and electricity, built it into a working cattle operation that supported them comfortably, and she'd lost it all in less than 2 years. Her father had died suddenly, massive heart attack while mending a fence line. She'd found him there at sunset, still holding the wire cutters, face peaceful, like he'd just decided to lie down for a rest. The doctor said it was quick, that he hadn't suffered. Stella wasn't sure if that made it better or worse. No chance to say goodbye, no final words of wisdom. Just gone, like a light switching off. The debts had come afterward. Loans she hadn't known about, signed against the property. Medical bills from treatments he'd never mentioned. A second mortgage taken out 5 years earlier. Her father had been proud, too proud to tell her they were struggling. He'd shouldered it all alone, tried to fix it himself, and when his heart gave out, the whole house of cards collapsed on her. She'd fought. God, she'd fought. Worked 3 jobs, sold off the cattle one by one, pawned her mother's wedding ring. But the numbers didn't care about effort or history or the sweat of 4 generations. The bank wanted their money, and when she couldn't pay, they took the land. Simple as that. 43 years erased like chalk on a blackboard. The job posting had appeared online 3 months into her desperate search for work. Correctional officer position at Grimstone Penitentiary. Starting salary high enough to make her blink twice. Benefits, housing assistance, immediate hire for qualified candidates. Military or law enforcement background preferred, but they'd consider relevant life experience. She had no military service, no police training, but she'd listed her ranching skills. Animal handling, crisis management, physical labor in extreme conditions, survival training. 2 days later, they'd called her for an interview. The interview had been strange. Not in the prison itself, but in a bland office building in Cheyenne. 3 men in suits asking questions that seemed to dance around what they really wanted to know. Could she handle violent confrontations? Yes, did she have family who'd worry if she worked dangerous hours? No, she was alone now. Could she follow orders even when they didn't make sense? She'd hesitated on that one, and the oldest man, silver hair, cold blue eyes, had smiled like he appreciated her honesty. They'd offered her the position before she left the building. Now here she was, watching the landscape change from mountains to plains to the industrial sprawl of eastern Colorado. Grimstone sat just across the state line, built on federal land in the middle of nowhere. Isolated by design, the bus driver had looked at her funny when she told him her stop. "You sure about that?" he'd asked. "Ain't nothing out there but the prison." That was the point. The sun was setting when the bus finally pulled into the small depot that served Grimstone's support town, if you could call it that. More like a cluster of buildings that existed only because the prison did. A motel, a diner, a gas station, a small grocery store. Maybe 300 people lived here, and every single one of them either worked at the prison or serviced those who did. The town had no name on any map. People just called it Grimstone, same as the prison. Stella collected her bags and stood on the dusty parking lot, getting her bearings. The air smelled different here, flat, dry, with an undercurrent of diesel and concrete. No pine trees, no creek water, no mountain wind. She felt untethered, like a boat cut loose from its mooring. A shuttle van sat idling near the depot entrance, Grimstone Penitentiary staff transport, stenciled on the side. The driver, a weathered man in his 60s with a grey beard, nodded to her. "You the new CO? Stella Archer. Marcus Webb, throw your bags in back. I'll run you up to staff housing, get you settled." His voice was gravel and cigarettes, but his eyes were sharp. He looked her over the way her father used to assess cattle, not judging, just gathering information. "You ever worked corrections before?" "No, figured. You got that green look about you." He pulled out of the lot, heading north on a 2-lane road that cut through scrubland. "Let me give you the short version. Grimstone ain't like other prisons. We house the worst of the worst. Guys who killed guards at other facilities. Gang leaders. Cartel bosses. The kind of men who got nothing left to lose because they're already serving life without parole, most of them. I read the literature. Literature don't tell you what it's like." Webb glanced at her. "You got any combat training?" "Military." "No, rancher." His eyebrows rose. "Rancher, huh? Where at?" "Wyoming. North of Laramie, mountain country. That's something, at least. You know how to handle yourself when things go sideways." "I've pulled calves in a blizzard, fought off coyotes, and once wrestled a bull that decided he didn't want to load into a trailer." "I can handle myself." Webb's face cracked into something that might have been a smile. "Might be you'll do all right then. But here's the thing, animals are predictable. Even a mean bull follows certain patterns. The men at Grimstone, some of them are smarter than you. Some of them are crazier than you can imagine. And all of them got time to think, to plan, to wait for their moment. You treat them like animals, you're going to get hurt." The prison appeared on the horizon as they crested a low rise. Stella's breath caught. She'd seen pictures, but they didn't capture the reality of it. Grimstone Penitentiary sprawled across the landscape like a concrete fortress. 30-foot walls topped with razor wire, guard towers every 100 yards, floodlights that could turn night into day. The main building was brutalist architecture at its most oppressive. All right angles and grey concrete, no curves, no softness, no humanity. Wings extended from the central hub like spokes on a wheel. Each wing housed a different cell block, Webb explained. Different security levels, different gang affiliations kept separate. "How many inmates?" Stella asked. 3,000, give or take. "Staff of about 800. Webb pulled up to a checkpoint, showed his ID to the guard. The heavy gate rolled open with a mechanical groan. "You'll start in D block. That's general population, high security. Lieutenant Drake runs that shift. He's by the book. Doesn't tolerate mistakes. They pass through 2 more checkpoints before reaching the staff housing. Complex, a series of low buildings behind the prison's outer wall, but still within the secured perimeter." Webb parked and helped her with her bags. "You're in Building C, Unit 12. They'll have your uniforms and equipment ready tomorrow. Orientation starts at 0600. Don't be late. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Webb paused, studying her again with those sharp eyes. Can I ask you something? Why'd you take this job? Woman like you, mountain rancher, must have had other options. Stella touched the compass in her pocket. I needed the money. Needed to start over. Fair enough. But let me tell you something, and you do well to remember it. Grimstone ain't a fresh start. It's the kind of place that changes you, and not usually for the better. You got any sense, you'll do your time, collect your paycheck, and get out before this place gets its hooks in you. He drove away, leaving her standing in front of her new home. A small apartment that smelled of industrial cleaner and loneliness. One bedroom, tiny kitchen, bathroom with fixtures that had seen better days, but it was clean and functional. Stella unpacked her bags, hanging her father's picture on the wall. Him standing in front of the ranch house, that rare smile on his weathered face. She set the compass on the nightstand where she could see it. Through the window, she could see the prison's main building. Even from here, even with the sun down and only the floodlights illuminating it, the place radiated menace. 3,000 of the country's most dangerous men, all locked behind those walls. And starting tomorrow, she'd be walking among them. Stella lay on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought about her father, wondered what he'd say if he could see her now. Probably something simple and true. Something about doing what needed to be done, about meeting life's challenges head-on. The compass glinted in the dim light from outside. Always pointing true, no matter how lost you got. She hoped that was right. Because looking at those prison walls, Stella felt more lost than she'd ever been in her life. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, she dreamed of mountains. 3 weeks into the job, Stella thought she was beginning to understand the rhythm of Grimstone. The morning count at 6, the breakfast rotation, the controlled movement between cells and common areas, the endless vigilance required to keep 3,000 violent men from tearing each other apart. She'd learned to read body language, to spot the telltale signs of trouble brewing, the clusters of inmates whispering, the sudden silences when guards approached, the way certain men would position themselves before violence erupted. She'd also learned that much of what happened at Grimstone happened because the guards let it happen. It was a Thursday afternoon, week 3, when everything changed. Stella was walking her assigned route through D Block, the long corridor of cells stacked 3 tiers high, the air thick with the smell of sweat, disinfectant, and something else she couldn't quite name. Desperation, maybe, or rage aged into something cold and patient. The fight broke out on Tier 2. 2 inmates, both in their 30s, both covered in gang tattoos. It started with words she couldn't hear, then escalated fast. A shove, a punch. Suddenly, they were on the ground, and one man had a makeshift shiv pressed against the other's throat. Stella's hand went to her radio, but before she could call it in, Lieutenant Drake's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Stand down, Archer. Do not intervene." She froze, watching the scene unfold 30 feet away. The man with the shiv was screaming in Spanish, pressing the crude weapon harder. A thin line of blood appeared on the other man's neck. "Sir, we need to—" I said, "Stand down." "That's an order." Other inmates had gathered, forming a circle around the combatants. Some were filming on contraband phones. Others were cheering. The whole tier had come alive with violent energy. And still, Drake's voice in her ear let them work it out. The fight lasted 2 more minutes. The man with the shiv eventually stood, leaving his opponent bleeding on the concrete floor. The crowd dispersed as quickly as it had formed. Only when it was over did other guards move in, calling for medical, securing the scene. The injured inmate was taken out on a stretcher, conscious but pale. The attacker was cuffed and led away, smirking. Drake appeared at Stella's elbow. He was tall, mid-40s, with the build of a former athlete gone soft around the middle. His uniform was always crisp, his manner always professional. "Walk with me, Archer." They moved away from the cell block into the administrative corridor. Drake's office was small and neat, files organized, nothing personal on display. He gestured for her to sit. "You did good back there," he said. "Following orders. That man could have died, but he didn't, and you know why. Because if we intervene every time two inmates want to settle their differences, we lose control. They need to know there are hierarchies in here, rules beyond ours. We maintain order by knowing when to step in and when to let things run their course. Stella kept her face neutral, but her stomach churned. That's the policy. That's reality. You'll learn. Drake opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. Now you're scheduled for a random cell inspection this afternoon. Cell 217, Tier 3. Standard contraband search. Here's the manifest. She took the folder, scanned the paperwork. Routine stuff. But something in Drake's tone made her look up. Is there something specific I'm looking for? Just do a thorough job. Report anything you find through proper channels. His eyes held hers. Proper channels meaning me. Not Webb, not anyone else. Understood? Understood. Cell 217 belonged to an inmate named Rodriguez. Mid-level gang member, in for armed robbery and assault. When Stella arrived with another officer for backup, Rodriguez watched from the common area while they searched his 8x10 concrete box. Standard issue everything. Cot, toilet, small metal desk. A few approved personal items. Family photos, paperback books, letters. She found the contraband in the third book she checked. Someone had hollowed out the pages, created a cavity. Inside were 3 cell phones, a charger, and something else. Several commissary receipts stained dark brown. Blood, she realized. Old blood on prison paperwork. Lieutenant Drake,
she said into her radio.
Got something here. Drake arrived quickly, dismissed the backup officer. He examined the phones, the receipts. His jaw tightened. Bag the phones. Leave the receipts. Sir? The phones are contraband. We'll process them properly. The receipts are trash, probably from the medical unit. Not relevant. He looked at her steadily. You understand? Stella understood plenty. She understood that Drake wanted evidence of phones, but not of whatever the bloody receipts meant. She understood that she was being tested, that her response would determine how she was treated going forward. She understood that she was standing at a crossroads, and the easy path was to do what she was told. I understand, she said. That night, she met Tess Holland for the first time. Tess worked the night shift in A Block, and they'd seen each other in passing but never spoken. Tess was younger, maybe 35, with auburn hair pulled back tight and tired eyes that had seen too much. They ended up at the same table in the staff cafeteria just before the shift change. You're the new one. Archer, right? Stella, you're Holland? Tess, I heard about your inspection today. Word traveled fast at Grimstone. How'd it go? Stella hesitated, then decided honesty might be worth the risk. Found phones. Found other things? Was told to report the phones and forget the other things. Tess nodded slowly, stirring her coffee. That's how it works here. You're catching on faster than most. She leaned in, voice dropping. Word of advice? Keep your head down. Do your job. Don't ask questions. There are things happening at Grimstone that go way beyond normal prison corruption, and the people running those things don't appreciate curiosity. What kind of things? The kind that got 3 guards transferred to other facilities in the past 2 years. Officially transferred. Unofficially. Tess shrugged. Nobody knows. They just disappeared from here and never showed up at their new assignments. But I'm sure it was all perfectly legitimate. The way she said it made Stella's skin prickle. You're saying they were killed. I'm saying they asked too many questions and then they vanished. I'm saying I had a brother who worked here, and he was one of them. I'm saying you seem like a decent person, and decent people at Grimstone have a short shelf life. Tess stood, picked up her tray. Just keep your head down, Stella. That's all I'm saying. She walked away, leaving Stella alone with cold coffee and colder thoughts. That night, lying in bed, Stella couldn't stop thinking about the bloody receipts, about Drake's order to ignore them, about Tess's warning, about the fight she'd been told not to stop. The prison felt different now, not just dangerous because of the inmates, but dangerous because of something rotten in its foundation. She picked up her father's compass, felt its familiar weight. What would you do? She whispered to his memory. Her father had never been one to look away from trouble. He'd faced things head-on, dealt with problems before they grew into catastrophes. He'd taught her to do the same. But he'd also taught her to be smart, to pick her battles, to know when you were outgunned. Through her window, the prison loomed against the night sky. Floodlights illuminated the walls, making the razor wire gleam like teeth. Stella closed her eyes, but sleep was a long time coming. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed of blood on paper, of men disappearing into darkness, of walls that had no doors, and somewhere in those dreams, she felt something shift. The easy path, the safe path, was to do as she was told. Take the paycheck, ignore the wrongness, survive her contract and get out. But that wasn't who her father had raised her to be. The compass always points true, he'd said. No matter how lost you get, maybe it was time to find out exactly what truth was hiding in Grimstone's shadows. The prison library was quieter than anywhere else in Grimstone. Not silent, 3,000 men generated noise that penetrated every corner of the facility, but muted, respectful almost. Stella had started volunteering there during her meal breaks, partly because she needed somewhere to think, partly because the head librarian was an inmate who seemed different from the others. Vincent Kowalski, known to everyone as Old Vinny, was 72 years old. White hair, stooped shoulders, hands that trembled slightly from Parkinson's. He'd been at Grimstone for 23 years, serving life for manslaughter. He'd never talked about his crime, and Stella never asked. What mattered was that Vinny knew the prison better than anyone, and he seemed willing to talk if you approached him right. "You're the mountain woman," he said the first time Stella stopped by to help reshelve books. His voice was soft, educated. "Webb told me about you. Said you pulled a calf in a blizzard once. Several times, actually. Takes a certain kind of strength. Not just physical." Vinny handed her a stack of westerns. "These go on the back wall. Genre fiction, alphabetical by author. They worked in companionable silence for a while. Other inmates came and went, checking out books, returning them. The library ran on an honor system that somehow worked. Stella had learned that even in Grimstone, certain spaces were considered neutral ground. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "How long has Warden Donnelly been here?" Vinny's hands paused. 7 years, why? "Just curious. The prison feels like it's been run a certain way for a long time." "It has. But Donnelly changed things when he came. Brought in his own people. Drake, for instance. Some of the senior guards. Pushed out the old administration." Vinny looked at her carefully. "You're asking because you've noticed things don't quite add up." It wasn't a question. Stella decided to trust him. "I found something during an inspection. Was told to ignore part of what I found. And I heard some guards disappeared. 3 of them. Good men, all of them. Asked questions about irregularities in commissary orders, visitor logs, maintenance schedules." Vinny's voice dropped lower. "Listen to me carefully. Grimstone isn't just a prison. It's something else too. What exactly, I don't know. But I've been here long enough to see patterns. Shipments that come at odd hours. Visitors who never sign in. Sections of the facility that get renovated but look the same afterward. Why are you telling me this?" "Because you remind me of someone. My daughter. She had your eyes, the kind that don't look away when they see something wrong." He smiled sadly. "She died young. Car accident. I like to think she'd have been the kind of person who stood up when it mattered." Stella spent the next week quietly observing. She started paying attention to things she'd previously dismissed as routine. The commissary orders Vinny had mentioned. The pattern of deliveries. The sections of the prison that seemed to have more security than others. She began keeping notes in a small journal she hid in her apartment, writing down times, dates, observations. She also started noticing the shiv marks, crude symbols scratched into walls, on cell bars, in the recreation yards. Always the same pattern, 3 wavy lines intersecting. She asked Vinny about them during one of her library shifts. "Los Fantasmas," he said quietly. The ghosts, one of the gangs here. They're not the biggest or the loudest, but they're the most connected. Word is, they've got ties outside that go all the way to the top of certain organizations. Cartel, among others. Their leader is Joaquín Ramirez. You've probably heard of him. They call him the Executioner. Stella had heard the name. Everyone had. Ramirez was infamous. A cartel enforcer who'd allegedly killed over 100 people before his arrest. He'd been at Grimstone for 5 years, running his gang from a cell in maximum security. He's in C block, Vinny continued. You'll cross paths eventually. Everyone does. Just remember, Joaquín isn't like the others. He's smarter, patient. Some say he's got more power inside these walls than Donnelly does. The crossing of paths happened sooner than Stella expected. She was assigned to escort a group of maximum security inmates to medical appointments. Standard procedure requiring 2 guards. Her partner was a veteran named Torres, a woman who'd been at Grimstone for 6 years and had the scars to prove it. Joaquín Ramirez was the 3rd inmate in line. He was shorter than she'd expected, maybe 5'8", but built like carved stone. His face was weathered, late 50s, with eyes that missed nothing. The tattoos covering his arms were intricate, telling stories in symbols Stella couldn't fully read. He looked at her as they walked, not threatening, just curious. "You're new," he said in accented English. "The mountain woman. I heard about you." "Keep moving," Torres said. "I mean, no disrespect. Just making conversation." Joaquín's voice was calm, almost gentle. "It's rare to see someone like you here. Someone who doesn't belong." "Keep moving," Stella echoed, but Joaquín kept talking, soft enough that only she could hear. "You've been asking questions. Looking at things you shouldn't. That's dangerous, but also interesting. Not everything locked up here deserves to be, Senora. Remember that." Before Stella could respond, they'd reached the medical unit. Joaquín went inside, still wearing that knowing expression. That night, she returned to her apartment to find signs of entry. Nothing obvious. The lock wasn't broken, nothing was stolen. But small things were different. Her books were in a slightly different order. Her coffee mug had been moved. The journal she'd been keeping was exactly where she'd left it, but open to a different page. Someone had been inside. Someone wanted her to know they'd been inside. The message was clear. "We're watching you." Stella stood in her living room, heart pounding, mind racing. She thought about Tess's warning, about the guards who'd disappeared, about the bloody receipts Drake had told her to ignore. Every instinct screamed at her to back off, to stop asking questions, to survive her contract and get out. But she thought about her father, too. About the compass he'd given her, about the values he'd lived by, about standing up when it mattered. She found the shiv 2 days later, tucked behind a loose brick in one of the maintenance corridors. She'd been doing her rounds when she noticed the brick was slightly out of alignment with the others. Inside the cavity was a crude knife made from sharpened metal, wrapped in tape. The handle was marked with those same 3 wavy lines, Los Fantasmas. Stella photographed it with her personal phone, then left it where she'd found it. If someone was watching her movements, she wanted to see what they'd do. The answer came that evening. Marcus Webb found her in the cafeteria and sat down without asking. His weathered face was grim. "You need to stop," he said flatly. "Whatever you're doing, whatever you think you're investigating, you need to stop right now. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb with me. Your apartment gets tossed, you find a weapon and photograph it instead of reporting it. You're spending time with Vinny in the library asking questions about Donnelly. You think nobody notices?" Webb leaned forward. "Listen to me carefully. I've been at Grimstone for 15 years. I've seen people try to dig into things, and I've seen what happens to them. You seem like a decent person, Stella. Don't become another cautionary tale. 3 guards disappeared," she said quietly. "Tess told me. Were you here when it happened?" Webb's face went carefully blank. "I was here, and you did nothing. I did what I had to do to survive. Same as everyone else here." He stood, looking down at her with something like pity. "Some questions get people killed. That's just a fact. You can accept it and live, or you can fight it and end up like those 3 guards. Your choice." He walked away, leaving Stella alone with her cooling coffee and her mounting fear. That night, holding her father's compass, she made her decision. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe it would get her killed. But she'd spent 3 weeks watching injustice play out behind these walls, and she couldn't keep looking away. Her father had taught her that some things were worth the risk. The compass always points true. Tomorrow, she'd start digging deeper. The prison archives were kept in a forgotten corner of the administration building, accessible only through the library. Vinny had mentioned them casually during one of Stella's visits, explaining that old records were stored there. Construction documents, personnel files from decades past, incident reports that had been digitized but whose paper originals remained filed away in case they were ever needed. "Nobody goes down there anymore," Vinny had said. "Dust and boxes. But if you ever wanted to understand Grimstone's history, that's where you'd look." It took Stella 2 weeks to work up the courage. She waited until late evening, when the library was nearly empty and Vinny was cataloguing new arrivals. She slipped through the door marked "Archives, authorized personnel only," and descended the concrete stairs into a basement that smelled of old paper and mildew. The archives were exactly as described, rows of metal shelves, holding bankers' boxes, everything labeled by year and category. Stella started with construction records from 7 years ago, right when Warden Donnelly had arrived. It took her an hour to find what she was looking for, but when she did, her hands trembled. The photograph was tucked into a folder of ribbon-cutting ceremony documents. 5 men standing in front of a construction site, hard hats on, smiling for the camera. The newest wing of Grimstone rising behind them. The date stamp read June 2018. She recognized Warden Paul Donnelly immediately. Younger then, but unmistakable. The 4 other men were strangers, but their names were typed on the back of the photo. Richard Sutton, CEO of Sutton Construction. James Blackwell, State Corrections Commissioner. Marcus Webb, and someone named Thomas Pike listed as Project Supervisor Marcus Webb, the same Webb who'd warned her to stop asking questions. He'd been involved in the construction of the new wing from the beginning. Stella photographed the picture with her phone, then dug deeper. Construction contracts, cost overruns, change orders. Sutton Construction had been paid $43 million to build the new wing. That seemed high, but Stella wasn't an expert. What caught her attention were the amendment. Contracts, additional payments for structural modifications, and specialized security features. Another $15 million in amendments. She cross-referenced the names. James Blackwell had died 3 years ago, ruled an accident, fell downstairs in his own home. Thomas Pike had died 2 years ago, single car accident on a mountain road. The third man, a junior project manager whose name appeared on subsidiary documents, had died last year, apparent suicide. 3 of the 5 men in that photograph were dead. Only Donnelly and Sutton remained alive. Stella's mind raced. This couldn't be coincidence. But what connected construction of a prison wing to 3 deaths? What were the structural modifications that cost $15 million? She spent another hour searching through incident reports, looking for anything unusual from the period after the new wing opened. The reports were frustratingly routine. Fights, contraband discoveries, lockdowns. Nothing that stood out. But there were gaps, entire days, where incident reports should have existed but didn't, as if someone had removed them. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made her freeze. She quickly tucked the photograph back into its folder, closed the box, and tried to look casual, as Vinny appeared at the bottom of the stairs. "Find anything interesting?" he asked mildly, just looking at old records. Be careful, Stella. The past has a way of reaching into the present at Grimstone." He paused. "But since you're already down here, you might want to look at visitor logs from the same period. Sometimes it's not what happened inside the prison that matters, but who came to visit." He left her alone again. Stella found the visitor logs, thick binders organized by date. She started with the month the new wing opened, July 2018, and began scanning names. Most were family members of inmates, lawyers, clergy. Standard stuff, then she saw it. A name that appeared 3 times that month, always after regular visiting hours, always checked in by someone whose signature was illegible. Richard Sutton, the construction CEO who'd built the new wing. Why would he be visiting a prison repeatedly after his project was complete? The riot started at 3 in the afternoon the next day. Stella was on duty in the yard when it erupted, a fight between rival gangs that exploded into full-scale chaos. Alarms blared. Guards rushed to contain the violence. Inmates scattered, some fighting, others using the chaos as cover for their own purposes. Stella found herself pushed toward the far corner of the yard, separated from her unit. An inmate went down hard near her, blood streaming from a head wound. 2 others were beating him systematically. She moved without thinking, the way she'd intervened in animal fights on the ranch, quick, decisive, putting herself between the attackers and their victim. One of the attackers swung at her. She ducked, used his momentum against him, sent him sprawling. The second one was smarter, more dangerous. He came at her with purpose. They grappled briefly before other guards arrived with riot gear, pulling inmates apart, restoring order through overwhelming force. When the yard finally cleared 30 minutes later, Stella found herself standing next to Lieutenant Drake. He was breathing hard, his uniform torn. Blood on his hands, not his own. "You saved my life," he said quietly. She looked at him in confusion. "What?" That second attacker. "He had a shiv, was coming at me from behind. You took him down before he could use it." Drake's face was unreadable. "I owe you." Stella hadn't even realized Drake was nearby during the fight. Hadn't thought about who she was protecting, only that someone needed help. But she could see in his eyes that something had shifted. The suspicious lieutenant who'd ordered her to ignore evidence now looked at her with grudging respect. "Just doing my job," she said. "Yeah. Well, thank you." He walked away, but not before adding, "Be careful, Archer. This place has a way of eating people up." That evening, as Stella sat in her apartment, trying to process everything, the photograph, the visitor logs, the riot, Drake's unexpected gratitude, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find an inmate clerk she recognized from the library. "Message for you," he said, handing her a folded paper. "From Joaquín." Before she could respond, he was gone. Stella unfolded the paper. The handwriting was precise, educated. "You're asking about the foundation. The prison was built on more than concrete. There are spaces in Grimstone that don't appear on any map. Doors that shouldn't exist. If you want to understand what Donnelly is hiding, look at what the construction really built. But be warned, this knowledge has killed before. Los Fantasmas see much, but we cannot protect you if you move too quickly. Patience, Senora. The truth reveals itself to those who survive long enough to see it. No signature. Just those 3 wavy lines at the bottom. The mark of Los Fantasmas." Stella burned the note in her sink, watching the paper curl and blacken. But the words stayed with her. "Spaces that don't appear on any map. Doors that shouldn't exist. The new wing. The 15 million in structural modifications. What had Richard Sutton really built?" Marcus Webb appeared at her door an hour later. His face was haggard, older than she'd ever seen it. "We need to talk," he said. "Really talk. About your father." Stella's blood went cold. "What about my father?" Webb stepped inside, closed the door. "James Thomas Archer. Decorated Army Ranger. Died of a heart attack 2 years ago. Except it wasn't just a heart attack, was it? He was investigating something. And you need to know what happened to him before you end up the same way." Marcus Webb sat at Stella's small kitchen table, his weathered hands wrapped around a mug of coffee he hadn't touched. The weight of years pressed down on him, visible in every line of his face. Outside, the prison's floodlights cast harsh shadows through the window. "Your father and I served together," Webb began. "Delta Force back in the 90s. Iraq, Afghanistan, places that don't officially exist. We were brothers in every way that mattered. When we both got out, we stayed in touch. He went back to Wyoming. I drifted for a while before ending up here." Stella's throat felt tight. "He never mentioned you." "No, he wouldn't have. We had a falling out about 10 years back. Different philosophies about what we owed the world after the things we'd done in uniform. He thought we had a responsibility to stand up against injustice. I thought we'd earned the right to mind our own business." Webb finally looked at her. "Turns out he was right. What happened to him? 2 years ago, your father was doing contract work for a veterans organization, helping other former military guys find jobs, navigate benefits, that kind of thing. One of the men he was helping had worked construction, worked on a project managed by Richard Sutton's company. Big federal contract, prison expansion in 3 states, including here at Grimstone. Webb pulled out a worn envelope from his jacket, set it on the table. This guy told your father something wasn't right. Materials being delivered that weren't on the manifests. Sections of the buildings that didn't match the official blueprints. Money changing hands under the table. Your father started looking into it. Called me because I was here, asked if I'd noticed anything unusual. And had you? Yeah, I'd noticed. The new wing opened, and suddenly there were areas we couldn't access. Deliveries at odd hours. Visitors who came and went without proper documentation. I told your father to drop it, that he was playing with fire. But you know how he was. Stella did know. Her father had never walked away from something that smelled wrong. What did he find? I don't know the specifics. He was careful, didn't share everything over the phone. But he called me 3 days before he died. Said he had proof of something big. Said Sutton Construction wasn't just building prisons. They were building infrastructure for something else. Something that connected to organized crime, possibly human trafficking. He was going to hand everything over to the FBI. 3 days before his heart attack, Webb met her eyes. It wasn't a heart attack, Stella. Your father was murdered. Made to look like natural causes, but I'd stake my life on it. The ranch debts that destroyed you afterward, those weren't real either. Someone manufactured them to keep you struggling, to keep you from asking questions about his death. The room seemed to tilt. Stella gripped the edge of the table. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was a coward. Because I convinced myself I was wrong, that I was seeing conspiracies where there were none. Because I was afraid. Webb's voice cracked. I've lived with that guilt every day since. When I saw you'd applied here, when I saw your background matched what we needed, I thought maybe I could make it right. Maybe I could bring you here, let you see what your father saw, and together we could finish what he started. You manipulated me. Yes. You used me as bait. Yes. Webb didn't flinch from it. I won't insult you by making excuses. It was wrong. But your father died trying to expose something evil, and I thought you deserved the chance to complete his work. I also thought you had the skills to survive it. Mountain woman raised by a Delta operator, tough as nails. If anyone could handle Grimstone, it was you. Stella wanted to be angry. Part of her was furious, but another part understood. Her father would have done the same thing. Sometimes the mission required hard choices. The envelope, she said. What's in it? Everything your father gave me before he died. Notes, photographs, financial records. He sent it registered mail, marked to be opened only if something happened to him. It arrived 4 days after his funeral. I've kept it hidden ever since. Webb pushed it across the table. It's yours now. But Stella, if you open this, if you continue down this path, there's no going back. The people behind this have killed before. They'll kill again. She picked up the envelope. Her father's handwriting on the outside, her name written in his precise capital letters. Inside, she knew would be the truth he died for. There's one more thing, Webb said. Your father's compass, the one he gave you. Take a close look at it, really close. After Webb left, Stella sat alone in the dark, the envelope and compass on the table before her. She picked up the compass first, examining it under her desk lamp. Sterling silver, her father's initials engraved on the back. She'd carried it for 27 years, never thinking it was anything more than a sentimental keepsake. Then she saw it. The engraving on the back wasn't just decorative. Using a magnifying glass, she could see that the pattern around his initials wasn't random flourishes. It was text. Tiny, precise lettering that spelled out coordinates. And something else. Evidence File 7A Redux, Federal Archive, Denver. Her hands shook. Her father had hidden information in the compass itself. All these years, she'd been carrying a key without knowing it. The envelope contained exactly what Webb had promised. Photographs of construction sites, including Grimstone's new wing. Financial documents showing money flowing through shell companies. Names and dates. Testimony from the construction worker who'd first raised concerns. A man named David Chen, who died in a workplace accident 6 months after talking to her father. But the most damning evidence was a set of architectural drawings. Official blueprints for Grimstone's new wing, stamped and approved by the state. And beside them, a second set of drawings, unmarked, showing the same wing but with additional features. Hidden corridors, secret rooms, access points that didn't appear on the official plans. Someone had built a prison within a prison. The question was why. Stella spent the next 3 days volunteering for graveyard shifts, using the quiet hours to explore. She started mapping the new wing, comparing what she observed to both sets of blueprints. She found inconsistencies, walls that were thicker than they should be, rooms that were smaller than their official dimensions suggested, service corridors that dead-ended where the blueprints showed them continuing. She also found the keys, hidden behind a loose brick in a maintenance tunnel, exactly where Joaquín's note had hinted she should look. 3 keys on a simple ring, unmarked but clearly made for specific locks. They felt heavy in her pocket, like they carried more than just physical weight. On her 4th graveyard shift, she used them. The first key opened a maintenance door she'd seen other guards walk past without noticing. Behind it was a narrow corridor, bare concrete, fluorescent lights that flickered. The second key opened another door at the end of that corridor, and there, finally, she found proof. The hidden corridor system was real. Not large, but extensive enough. A network of passages running parallel to the official prison infrastructure. Signs of recent use everywhere, fresh footprints in the dust, cigarette butts, food wrappers. Someone was using these passages regularly. She followed them deeper, taking photographs, documenting everything. The corridors led to the basement level, to an area that shouldn't exist according to any official map of the facility. She found paperwork, shipping manifests, inventory lists. None of it matched prison records. Supplies coming in that weren't food, weren't equipment, weren't anything a prison should need. And then she heard voices. Stella froze, pressing herself against the wall. 2 men, maybe 30 feet away, around a corner she couldn't see past. Their voices echoed strangely in the concrete space. Next shipment arrives Thursday. Same protocol. Donnelly's getting nervous. Thinks someone's been poking around? Let him worry. We're too far in to stop now. Besides, who's going to believe it? It's genius, hiding in plain sight inside a prison. What about Sutton? He's paid to keep his mouth shut. He knows what happens if he talks. The voices faded as the men moved away. Stella waited 10 minutes before carefully making her way back the way she'd come. Her heart pounded so hard she thought they'd hear it echoing through the corridors. She returned to her apartment just as dawn was breaking. Tess was waiting outside her door. "We need to talk," Tess said. "I know what you've been doing, and I know why." She held up a photograph, her brother, young and smiling in his corrections officer uniform. "He found the same things you're finding." And then he disappeared. "I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, waiting for someone brave enough or stupid enough to help me use it. Why didn't you say something before?" "Because I had to be sure about you. Sure you wouldn't run, wouldn't fold, wouldn't sell me out to Donnelly?" Tess's eyes were fierce. "My brother's name was Officer David Holland. He was 29 years old. He was going to be a father, and they killed him because he couldn't look away from what was happening here." She handed Stella a flash drive. "Everything I have. Every document, every photograph, every witness statement I could gather without getting caught. Between what you've found and what I've collected, we might have enough. But we need more. We need someone on the inside who can corroborate. Someone they can't disappear." "Joaquín," Stella said. Tess nodded. "The executioner. He knows everything that happens at Grimstone. If we can get him to talk, to testify, we might actually be able to bring Donnelly down. And who's going to believe a cartel enforcer? Nobody. Not alone, but with physical evidence, documentation, and his testimony, it becomes a lot harder to dismiss." Tess looked at the lightening sky. "I have to go. My shift starts in 20 minutes. But think about it. We're running out of time. Donnelly knows someone's investigating. Pretty soon, he's going to make a move to protect himself." After Tess left, Stella sat with all the evidence spread around her. Her father's notes, Webb's confession, Tess's flash drive, the keys to the hidden corridors, the compass that had carried secrets for years. She thought about her father, about the legacy he'd left her. Not the ranch, not the land, not the physical inheritance, But something more important, the responsibility to stand against evil, even when it was dangerous. Even when it might cost everything, the compass pointed north. Steady and true. It was time to finish what her father had started. Getting into Warden Donnelly's office required planning, timing, and a certain amount of recklessness. Stella and Tess spent 3 days mapping his schedule, noting when he left the building, when he held meetings, when his assistant took breaks. They needed 30 minutes minimum, ideally an hour. They needed a distraction that wouldn't seem suspicious. The opportunity came during a routine medical emergency. An inmate in B block collapsed during lunch, real collapse, not staged. Guards rushed to respond. Medical personnel were called. Chaos rippled through the facility as protocols were followed. In the confusion, with attention focused elsewhere, Stella slipped away from her assigned post and made her way to the administrative wing. Donnelly's office was locked, but Tess had spent 2 years preparing for this moment. She'd stolen a master key from maintenance months ago, had it copied, returned the original before it was missed. The door opened with a soft click. The office was exactly what Stella expected. Expensive furniture, awards on the walls, photographs of Donnelly shaking hands with politicians and law enforcement officials. Everything carefully curated to present an image of professional success. She moved quickly to his desk, pulling out drawers, photographing documents with her phone. Most of it was routine: personnel files, budget reports, correspondence. But in the bottom drawer, hidden under a false bottom she almost missed, was a personal safe. Small electronic keypad lock. Stella stared at it, frustrated. She had maybe 20 minutes left. Then she remembered something her father had taught her. Most people use familiar numbers for codes, birthdays, anniversaries, addresses. She'd memorized Donnelly's file. Born August 17, 1968. She tried 81768. The safe stayed locked. She tried variations, nothing. Then she thought about the photograph she'd found in the archives. The date stamp, June 2018, the month the new wing opened. She tried 0620CE. The safe opened. Inside was a leather ledger, the kind people use for personal accounting. Stella flipped through it quickly, photographing every page. The entries were coded, numbers and letters that didn't immediately make sense. But there were names too, scattered throughout, and dollar amounts that made her blood run cold. Millions of dollars, flowing in and out over the past 7 years. She also found a burner phone, a second set of keys, and a USB drive. She didn't have time to examine the drive. She just pocketed it, figuring she'd deal with the consequences later. The keys she photographed, then left in place. Taking them would alert Donnelly immediately. As she was closing the safe, she heard voices in the hallway. Donnelly returning with someone else. Stella's heart hammered. She'd taken too long. She quickly shut the safe, made sure everything looked undisturbed, and looked for an exit. There was a second door in the office, leading to a private bathroom. She slipped inside just as the main office door opened. Through the crack in the bathroom door, she could see Donnelly enter with a man she recognized from the photographs, Richard Sutton. Both men looked tense. The FBI's been asking questions, Sutton was saying, about construction contracts in 3 states. They haven't connected the dots yet, but they're looking. Let them look. Donnelly's voice was cold, controlled. Everything's airtight. The official records are clean. Even if they found the modifications, we can explain them as security enhancements. What about the guard? The one who's been poking around? Gotcha. She's becoming a problem, but I've got Drake watching her. If she gets too close, we'll handle it the same way we handled the others. Stella's blood ran cold. They were talking about killing her, discussing it like it was a routine business decision. Your brother-in-law getting nervous? Donnelly asked. James is fine. He knows his cut depends on staying quiet. Besides, what's he going to do? Confess that he helped build infrastructure for human trafficking. He's as culpable as we are. Human trafficking. Stella had suspected, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach turn. The hidden corridors, the off-book shipments, the money flowing through shell companies, all of it was supporting an operation that moved people like cargo. The next shipment comes in Thursday night, Sutton continued. 23 people this time. The buyers are lined up, the route is secure. It's our biggest payday yet. Make sure your people are careful. We can't afford any more attention. The conversation shifted to logistics. Stella couldn't quite follow. After 15 minutes that felt like hours, Sutton left. Donnelly remained in his office making phone calls. Stella was trapped, her legs cramping, barely daring to breathe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Donnelly left. Stella counted to 100, then carefully emerged from the bathroom. She checked the hallway, empty. She slipped out of the office and made her way back toward the cell blocks, trying to look like she had every right to be where she was. Marcus Webb caught her near the yard entrance. His face was pale. "Where the hell were you?" "They called an accountability check during the medical emergency." "You weren't at your post." "I was in the bathroom. Started my period, needed supplies." It was a lie he couldn't easily verify, and Webb knew it. But he nodded, accepting it because he had to. "Be more careful," he muttered. "You're on thin ice." That night, Stella met with Tess in a storage room in the basement, one of the few places they were certain wasn't monitored. Stella shared everything she'd heard, showed her the photographs of the ledger, pulled out the stolen USB drive. "Thursday night," Tess said. "That's 2 days from now. If we're going to stop this, we need to move fast. We need help. Someone with actual authority. Someone who can't be bought off or intimidated. I might know someone." Tess pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts. "Lieutenant Drake." "Drake? He's Donnelly's man." "I don't think so." "Not anymore." Tess showed her a series of messages she'd received over the past month. Careful, coded language, but clear enough in context. Drake had been asking questions, pushing back against orders, showing signs of doubt. "I think he's investigating too. I think he might be more than just a corrections officer." The meeting with Drake happened the next morning, in the prison chapel during a time when it was officially closed for cleaning. Drake arrived looking cautious, suspicious. But when Stella laid out everything they had, the photographs, the documents, the ledger codes, the recording she'd made of Donnelly's conversation using her phone, his face changed. "I'm FBI," he said quietly. "Undercover, embedded 18 months ago. We suspected Grimstone was involved in something, but we couldn't prove it. Couldn't get close enough to Donnelly to gather evidence. Every time we got close, people disappeared or died, and the investigation stalled." Stella felt a surge of relief so strong it made her dizzy. They weren't alone. They had someone with actual authority on their side. "The ledger codes," Drake said, examining the photographs. "These match patterns we've seen in other trafficking operations. But we need to decrypt them fully, and we need to figure out what's on this USB drive." He pulled out a laptop, inserted the drive. After a few minutes of clicking through files, his face went grim. "These are transport schedules. Not just for Grimstone, for facilities in 5 states. Names, dates, routes. It's the entire operation, documented from the inside." He looked at Stella and Tess. "This is enough. With this and the testimony of someone who's seen the operation firsthand, we can bring down everyone involved." "Joaquín," Stella said. "He knows everything. Los Fantasmas have been watching this happen for years. Getting a cartel enforcer to testify against a prison warden is going to be complicated," Drake said. "But if he has information about the trafficking side, if he can connect it to his own organization's operations, the FBI can offer him a deal. Reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation. We need to talk to him," Tess said. "Soon, before Thursday's shipment. I can arrange it," Drake said. "But here's the problem. If Donnelly knows someone's investigating, which it sounds like he does, he's going to be watching everyone closely. We move too fast, we tip him off, and he destroys evidence. We move too slow, the shipment happens, and 23 people disappear into the system. We need Joaquín first," Stella said. "We need to know what he knows, what he can testify to. Then we plan the rest." Drake nodded slowly. "I'll set up a meeting. Make it look routine. He's due for a medical evaluation anyway. I can arrange for you two to be his escorts. But after that, we're committed. Once we approach him, once we reveal what we know, there's no backing out. Donnelly will either fold or come at us with everything he has." They agreed to meet again in 24 hours, after Drake had made the arrangements. As they left the chapel separately, Stella felt the weight of what they were attempting settle on her shoulders. They were 3 people trying to take down a conspiracy that had killed multiple times to protect itself. 3 people against a warden, a construction company, and who knew how many corrupt officials. But they also had something the conspirators didn't: physical evidence, documentation, and the determination to see justice done. That night, Stella held her father's compass and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From mountain rancher to prison guard to investigator, from daughter to orphan to someone carrying on her father's work. The path had been twisted, painful, manipulated by people who'd used her grief and desperation for their own purposes. But it had also led her exactly where she needed to be. Thursday was coming. The shipment was coming. And ready or not, they were going to stop it. The compass pointed steady and true, north toward whatever came next. The meeting with Joaquín was scheduled for Tuesday afternoon. Stella spent the morning reviewing everything they had, making sure every piece of evidence was documented, backed up, secured. Drake had arranged for copies to be sent to a trusted FBI contact outside the facility. Insurance, in case something went wrong. As she was preparing to leave for the meeting, going through Drake's files one final time to make sure they hadn't missed anything, she found it. A transfer order buried in a stack of routine personnel documents. A transfer order from her previous employer, a security company in Cheyenne she'd never heard of, to Grimstone Penitentiary. Dated 3 months before her father died. Stella's hands went cold. That was impossible. She'd applied to Grimstone after losing the ranch, after her father was already dead. She'd never worked for any security company in Cheyenne. She looked closer at the document. The signatures were forged, had to be. The dates didn't make sense, but the order was official, filed properly, complete with all the right authorization codes. Someone had created a false employment history for her, had maneuvered her into this position before she'd even known she needed it. She pulled out more documents, background check results that listed jobs she'd never held, references from people she'd never met. A complete fabricated history that existed only on paper, but existed thoroughly enough that it had passed whatever verification Grimstone required. Someone had been planning this for years. She confronted Marcus Webb in the parking lot as he was arriving for his shift, showed him the transfer order, watched his face carefully. Explain this. Webb looked at the document, and something in his expression shifted. Relief, maybe, or resignation. You found it. You did this. You created a fake history for me. You manipulated everything. The job posting, the interview, getting me hired here. This wasn't about giving me a chance to finish my father's work. This was about using me as a tool. Yes and no. Webb gestured toward his truck. Get in. We need to talk somewhere private. They drove to the edge of the prison's property, where the land opened up into empty scrubland. Webb parked and turned to face her, his weathered face showing every one of his 67 years. Your father didn't just investigate Richard Sutton. He was working on a larger operation, tracking corruption across the entire correction system. Sutton was one piece. Grimstone was another. He'd identified connections between construction companies, prison wardens, and organized crime in 7 states. He was building a case that would have brought down dozens of people. Then he died. Then he was murdered. Webb's voice was firm. 3 days before he was going to hand everything over to the FBI. His death was made to look natural, but it wasn't. I knew it immediately. Your father was the healthiest man I'd ever known. Didn't drink, didn't smoke, ran 5 miles every morning. His heart didn't just give out. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have started investigating, and they would have killed you too. Better you believed it was natural, grieved, moved on with your life. Safer that way. Webb looked away. But then the ranch started failing. The debts appeared. I realized they were destroying you financially, keeping you desperate and distracted. That's when I understood they hadn't just killed your father. They'd set up his death to look like the stress of debt had caused it, and they'd created real debt to make the story believable. Stella felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. The loans were fake. Not fake, real loans, taken out using forged documents with your father's signature. He never signed them, never knew about them, but legally they were binding. The people behind this, they're thorough. They cover their tracks. So you decided to bring me here, to finish what he started. Not just that. Webb pulled out an envelope, different from the one he'd given her before. I was your father's insurance policy. He knew the work was dangerous. He made arrangements. If anything happened to him, I was supposed to protect you. But he also made me promise something else. He said if the time was right, if you were strong enough, if the cause was just, I should bring you into the fight. The envelope contained a letter. Her father's handwriting, dated 1 week before his death. My dear Stella, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and Marcus has judged that you're ready to know the truth. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I'm sorry for the burden this knowledge places on you. But I also know you know the woman I raised. You won't walk away from injustice any more than I could. The work I've been doing is important. It's dangerous. People will die if it isn't finished. Marcus has all my research, all my evidence. He'll give it to you when the time is right. Trust him. Trust yourself, and remember, a good compass always points true. I love you. I'm proud of you. Finish what I started. Dad. Tears blurred Stella's vision. She folded the letter carefully, her hands shaking. He knew they were going to kill him. He suspected. That's why he prepared. Why he hid evidence in the compass. Why he set up the contingency plans. Why he trusted me to protect you and guide you when the time came. Webb's voice was thick with emotion. I've been at Grimstone for 15 years, Stella. Watching, waiting, gathering my own evidence. But I couldn't move against Donnelly alone. I needed someone with your father's integrity. Someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated. Someone with a personal stake in seeing this through. So you manufactured my hiring. Made it look legitimate. I created a background that would get you hired without raising suspicion. Made sure you'd be assigned to the right blocks, given access to the right areas. I've been watching over you since you arrived, making sure you stayed alive long enough to uncover what needed to be uncovered. And if I'd decided to keep my head down, to just take the paycheck and leave, Webb smiled sadly, then you wouldn't be James Archer's daughter. I knew what you'd do. Your father knew too. That's why he trusted you with this. Stella looked at the letter again, at her father's familiar handwriting. The anger she'd felt at being manipulated was still there, but it was complicated now. Mixed with understanding, with grief, with a strange sense of purpose. There's something else you need to know, Webb said. Drake isn't just FBI. He's the agent who was handling your father's case. When your father died, the investigation went cold. But Drake never let it go. He got himself embedded at Grimstone, hoping to find what your father had found. When I saw a chance to bring you in, I coordinated with him. We've been working together to position you, protect you, guide you toward the truth. You've been manipulating everything. Yes, because this is bigger than one prison. Bigger than Richard Sutton or Paul Donnelly. Your father uncovered a national trafficking network that uses the prison system as infrastructure. Moving people from facility to facility, hiding them in plain sight, using prison transfers as cover. Grimstone is just one node in a network that spans the country. He pulled out another document, the transfer order again, but this time with additional pages attached. Names, dates, locations. A map of connections between prisons, construction companies, and criminal organizations. This is what your father died for. This is what we've spent 2 years positioning you to expose. The evidence you've gathered, combined with what Drake has, combined with what your father left us, it's enough to bring down the entire network. But only if we move carefully. Only if we survive long enough to get it into the right hands. Stella's mind reeled. The compass in her pocket felt heavier than ever. Her father had known, had prepared for this, had trusted her to be strong enough to carry on his work. Joaquín, she said. What's his role in this? Joaquín Ramirez was investigating the same network from the cartel side. His daughter was taken by traffickers 4 years ago. He's been trying to find her ever since. That's why he got himself arrested, why he requested transfer to Grimstone. He knew this prison was part of the network. He's been gathering intelligence from the inside, same as us. His daughter, we don't know if she's alive. But Joaquín has information about the trafficking routes, the buyers, the methods. Combined with our evidence, his testimony could dismantle the entire operation. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it all settling between them. Stella thought about her father, about the life he'd lived, the death he'd faced, the legacy he'd left. She thought about the victims, people moved through the system like cargo, their lives destroyed for profit. She thought about the compass, about pointing true even when you're lost. Thursday, she said. The shipment. We stop it, Webb agreed. And we expose everyone involved. For your father, for Joaquín's daughter, for all the victims we can still save. Stella pulled out the compass, opened it. The needle pointed north, steady and true. Her father had carried it through combat, through danger, through the investigation that killed him. Now it was hers. The physical symbol of his legacy and her responsibility. Let's finish this, she said. Webb nodded, started the truck. As they drove back toward the prison, Stella felt something shift inside her. The anger at being manipulated was still there, but so was understanding. So was purpose. Her father had trusted her with this burden because he knew she could carry it, and she would, no matter what it cost. The compass always points true. The meeting with Joaquín took place in a medical examination room, away from the surveillance cameras that covered most of the prison. Drake had arranged it carefully. A routine medical check that wouldn't raise suspicions, with Stella and Tess as escorts. The room was small, sterile, with one examination table and a counter lined with medical supplies. Joaquín entered in handcuffs, flanked by 2 guards Drake had vetted as reliable. When the door closed, leaving just the 5 of them inside, Joaquín's expression shifted from the careful neutrality most inmates wore to something sharper. More present. I've been wondering when this conversation would happen, he said in his accented English. His voice was calm, measured. The mountain woman, the agent, the sister seeking justice. You've been busy? You know why we're here, Drake said. You want me to help you bring down Donnelly, to testify about the trafficking operation. In exchange, you'll offer me a reduced sentence, maybe transfer to a minimum security facility where I can serve my remaining time in relative comfort. Joaquín smiled without warmth. I've been waiting 2 years for someone to make this offer. Why wait? Stella asked. If you knew about the trafficking, why not come forward before? Because before I had no proof, no allies, no one who would believe a cartel enforcer over a prison warden. But more importantly, I didn't know where my daughter was. His face hardened. Now I do. The room went silent. Drake leaned forward. You know where she is? I know she passed through Grimstone 8 months ago. I know she was held in the hidden section of the new wing for 3 days. I know she was then transported to a facility in Nevada, and from there, his voice caught. From there the trail goes cold. But those 3 days she was here, I was 30 feet away from her, separated by walls I couldn't break through. Close enough to hear her crying at night. Stella felt her throat tighten. How do you know it was her? Los Fantasmas has eyes everywhere in this prison. They saw her, described her. My Isabella, 14 years old when she was taken, 17 now. They told me she was here, but by the time I could arrange to confirm it, she was gone. Moved to the next location in the network. The Thursday shipment, Tess said. 23 people. Do you know who they are? Where they're coming from? Mexico, primarily. Some from Central America. Young women, mostly. A few men. They come through a pipeline that starts at the border, moves through a series of safe houses, then enters the prison system. Grimstone is a way station. They're held here for a few days, while buyers are contacted, purchases arranged. Then they're moved again, scattered across the country to wherever they've been sold to. He pulled out a folded paper from his prison uniform. Inmates weren't supposed to have paper, but rules meant nothing when you ran the most powerful gang in the facility. The paper contained a hand-drawn map, incredibly detailed. The hidden corridors, the secret cells. I've had my people mapping them for 18 months. This shows everything. Access points, security measures, guard rotations. Everything you need to intercept Thursday's shipment. Drake studied the map. This is incredible intelligence. Why didn't you share this before? Because I needed leverage. I needed to be valuable enough that when I finally offered to help, you'd have to agree to my terms. Joaquín looked at each of them in turn. I want full immunity for my testimony. I want to be released after the trials. And I want the FBI to find my daughter. I can't promise release, Drake said, but immunity for testimony and a task force dedicated to finding your daughter that I can arrange. Then we have an agreement. Joaquín extended his cuffed hands. Now, let me tell you everything I know about how this operation works. For the next hour, he talked about the routes trafficking victims took through the system, about the guards and administrators who facilitated it, about the money, staggering amounts flowing through shell companies and offshore accounts, about the buyers, wealthy individuals, criminal organizations, people who paid premium prices for young women and men they could exploit. Donnelly isn't the top, Joaquín explained. He's middle management. The real power is Richard Sutton. He created this system, identified prisons that needed expansion, won the construction contracts, built the hidden infrastructure during the legitimate construction, then partnered with corrupt wardens to operate the trafficking network. He's done this in 7 states. Grimstone is just one facility. How many victims? Stella asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Hundreds, maybe thousands over the past 7 years. They're careful. They space out shipments. They mix real prisoner transfers with the trafficking victims, so the paperwork looks legitimate. Very few people know the full scope. Those who discover it tend to die, like my father, Stella thought. Like Tessa's brother. Thursday night, Drake said, bringing them back to the immediate crisis. Walk us through what happens. The shipment arrives at 11 p.m., a semi-truck disguised as a routine prison supply delivery. It parks at the loading dock on the north side, the one that's technically for food services, but is rarely used at night. The victims are moved from the truck into the hidden corridors. They're processed, photographed, basic medical screening, assigned numbers. They're held in the secret cells while buyers are contacted. Usually they're moved out within 72 hours. Security during the transfer. Donnelly supervises personally. Lieutenant Morgan, he's Donnelly's actual enforcer, handles the physical movement. 4 to 6 contracted security guards who work for Sutton, not the prison. They're armed, experienced, and have no qualms about killing anyone who interferes. We need to catch them in the act, Drake said. Document the transfer, secure the victims, arrest everyone involved. But we can't do it alone. We need FBI backup. My backup team is 2 days out, Drake admitted. I called them after our last meeting. But they're coming from Denver, and they have to coordinate with local authorities to avoid tipping off anyone connected to Donnelly. They arrive Friday morning, after the shipment, Tess said flatly. After those 23 people disappear into the system, unless we intercept it ourselves. 5 of us against 6 armed security contractors, plus Donnelly and Morgan, plus however many corrupt guards are involved. Stella shook her head. We're outgunned. Then we even the odds. Joaquín's eyes gleamed. We create chaos. Make Donnelly think his operation is falling apart. Force him to react emotionally instead of tactically. A riot, Webb said slowly. Everyone turned to look at him. We stage a prison riot. Enough chaos that Donnelly has to divert resources. Enough distraction that we can move freely through the facility. You're talking about unleashing violence in a prison full of violent men, Drake said. People will get hurt. People might die. People are dying now, Tess shot back. My brother died. Stella's father died. Joaquín's daughter might be dead. We can control a riot. Minimize casualties, focus it in specific areas, keep it contained. But we need that chaos to cover our movements. They argued for another 20 minutes. The ethics of deliberately causing a riot. The risk to innocent inmates and guards. The possibility that it could spiral out of control. But ultimately, they came back to the same reality. They couldn't let another 23 people be trafficked. And they couldn't stop the shipment without creating a major distraction. Los Fantasmas can control the riot, Joaquín said. I can signal my people, tell them exactly where to cause trouble and where to hold back. We focus the violence in D and E blocks, far from the loading dock and the hidden corridors. Make it look spontaneous, but keep it managed. You're sure you can control it? I've been running operations in this prison for 5 years. I know every gang leader, every power structure, every alliance. Yes, I can control it. For a few hours at least. Drake looked at each of them. If we do this, if we go forward with this plan, we're all committed. No backing out, no second thoughts. We're deliberately causing a riot, interfering with a criminal operation involving people who've killed before, and putting ourselves in harm's way. Everyone clear on that? One by one they nodded. Stella thought about her father, about the compass in her pocket, about pointing true even when the path was dangerous. They spent the next hour planning. Timing, positioning, contingencies. Joaquín drew more maps, explained the prison's gang territories, identified which leaders would respond to his call and which needed different motivation. Webb provided information about guard schedules, security protocols, response procedures. Drake outlined how they'd document everything, how they'd secure the victims, how they'd coordinate with his FBI backup once the operation was underway. Stella's role was clear. She and Tess would access the hidden corridors during the riot, document the trafficking victims, secure them, and gather evidence. Drake would position himself to intercept Donnelly and Morgan when they arrived to check on the shipment. Webb would control the riot response, making sure it stayed contained but didn't get shut down too quickly. Joaquín would orchestrate the chaos from his cell, using Los Fantasmas' communication network. Thursday night, Drake said. The riot starts at 10:30. That gives us 30 minutes before the shipment arrives. We move fast, we stay smart, and we pray nothing goes wrong. And if something does go wrong, Tess asked, then we improvise. But we don't stop. We've come too far, and too many people have died for this. We see it through, whatever it takes. As they prepared to leave, Joaquín caught Stella's arm. Your father, James Archer. I knew of him. In my world, his name was spoken with respect. He was hunting the same monsters I was hunting, just from the other side. He would be proud of you. How do you know about my father? Because the people who killed him, they're the same people we're bringing down Thursday night. He got close to Sutton, close to exposing the whole network. They couldn't allow that, but what they didn't count on was his daughter being strong enough to finish his work. Joaquín smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. You have his courage, his commitment. That's rarer than you think. Don't waste it. That night Stella couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, holding her father's compass, thinking about all the choices that had led to this moment. The manipulation, the deaths, the suffering, the courage it took to stand against evil even when you were afraid. Tomorrow was Wednesday. They had one day to finalize their plans, to prepare, to gather their courage. And then Thursday would come, bringing chaos and confrontation and the chance, finally, to expose the truth. The compass pointed north through the darkness. Always steady, always true. Stella hoped she could be the same. Thursday evening arrived too quickly and too slowly. Stella felt every minute stretch and compress, time moving strangely as 10:30 approached. She checked her equipment 3 times, phone fully charged, spare battery pack, the unauthorized keys to the hidden corridors secure in her pocket. Her father's compass rested against her chest, tucked inside her uniform shirt. At 10:15, she met Tess in the corridor outside D Block. Neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. They'd reviewed the plan until they could recite it in their sleep. Now it was just a matter of execution. At 10:28, the first alarm sounded. The riot started in D Block, exactly as planned. Fighting erupted in the common area, Los Fantasmas against the Aryan Brotherhood, a conflict that had been simmering for weeks and now exploded into violence. Guards rushed to respond, following protocols that had been drilled into them. Lockdown procedures initiated, backup units deployed, exactly the chaos they needed. Stella and Tess moved in the opposite direction, away from the riot, toward the new wing. The guards were too focused on containing the violence to notice 2 officers moving with purpose through less traveled corridors. They reached the maintenance tunnel Webb had identified, the one that connected to the hidden passages. Stella used the first key. The door opened silently, well-oiled hinges, maintained by people who used this passage regularly. They slipped inside, closing the door behind them. The corridor beyond was dim, lit by occasional fluorescent strips. Concrete walls, bare floor, the smell of damp and something else. Fear, maybe. Desperation. They followed Joaquín's map, moving quickly but carefully. The sounds of the riot were muted here, distant thunder they could ignore. After 5 minutes of navigation through the passages, they reached another door. The second key worked. Beyond it lay the hidden cells. 7 people occupied the makeshift holding area. 5 women, 2 men, ages ranging from late teens to mid-30s. They cowered when Stella and Tess entered, pressing themselves against the concrete walls, eyes wide with terror. "We're not going to hurt you," Stella said, keeping her voice calm, gentle. "We're here to help, to get you out." One of the women, maybe 20 years old, dark hair, wearing clothes that had once been nice but were now dirty and torn, clutched something in her hands, a crude cross, made from 2 pieces of scrap wood bound together with wire. She held it like a talisman, knuckles white. "Por favor," the woman whispered. "Por favor, no más." "No more," Tess said in halting Spanish. "We're taking you to safety, all of you, but we need you to trust us." Stella pulled out her phone, began documenting everything. The cells, the conditions, the victims themselves, photographing faces with their permission, recording their surroundings. This was evidence. This was proof of what had been happening in Grimstone's shadows. One of the men spoke English. "You're prison guards. Why should we trust you?" "Guards brought us here. Different guards," Stella said. "Corrupt ones working with the traffickers. We're trying to stop them. But I need you to tell me, when did you arrive? How did you get here?" 3 days ago. We were promised work in America. Good jobs, legal visas. Instead, they took our money, our documents, brought us here. Said we'd be sold, used." His voice broke. "We tried to escape once. They beat us. Told us the next person who tried would die." Stella felt rage burn through her chest. This was what her father had died trying to stop. This was what Grimstone had been built to facilitate. Not justice, not rehabilitation, slavery. Human trafficking in the heart of America's prison system. "We're getting you out," she said firmly. "Right now. Come with us." They began moving the victims through the corridors, back toward the main prison. It was slow going. The captives were weak, scared, some injured. But they moved as quickly as they could. Joaquín's map, guiding them through passages that avoided the riot zones. They were halfway back when they ran into opposition. Lieutenant Morgan appeared at the end of the corridor with 4 guards. Stella didn't recognize Sutton's security contractors, she realized. All armed, all blocking their only exit route. "Well," Morgan said, his voice echoing in the concrete space, "looks like we got ourselves a problem." Stella and Tess immediately positioned themselves between the victims and the armed men. Stella's hand moved to her radio, but Morgan laughed. "Radios don't work down here. These corridors were built with signal blockers. Nobody knows you're here. Nobody's coming to help." He gestured to his men. "We can't let you leave with them. You understand that, right? This operation is too important, too profitable. You should have kept your nose out of it." "FBI knows about this," Stella said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Agent Drake has already transmitted evidence. Even if you kill us, the operation is blown." "Maybe, but that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight's problem is you." Morgan drew his weapon. "I'm sorry it has to be this way. You seem like decent people, but you made your choice." The contractors raised their guns. 7 trafficking victims huddled behind Stella and Tess, 2 prison guards with no weapons except their training and determination, against 5 armed men in a corridor with no exits. The compass pressed against Stella's chest, steady and true. Her father had faced death, knowing what he was fighting for. Now it was her turn. "Stand down," she said, even knowing it was futile. "This ends now, one way or another." Morgan's finger moved to the trigger. Stella tensed, preparing to fight even though she knew they couldn't win. Behind her, the woman with the cross prayed quietly in Spanish. Then the lights went out, not just the lights in their corridor, all the lights in the hidden passages. Emergency systems should have kicked in, but they didn't. Complete darkness. Confused shouts from Morgan and his men. And in that darkness movement, Los Fantasmas had arrived. The darkness lasted 30 seconds. In those 30 seconds, everything changed. Stella heard bodies hitting concrete, grunts of pain, weapons clattering to the floor. Organized violence happening with precision in the blackness. Then emergency lights flickered on, dim red bulbs that barely illuminated the corridor. Morgan and his 4 contractors were on the ground, disarmed. Standing over them were 6 inmates, all bearing the Los Fantasmas tattoos. And behind them, somehow having navigated the prison's lockdown, was Joaquín himself. "I told you," he said calmly, looking at Stella. "Los Fantasmas see everything. When I heard Morgan moving toward your position, I arranged an intervention." He looked down at the captured security contractors. "These men will not interfere further." "You can't be here," Stella said, though relief flooded through her. "You're supposed to be in your cell." "During a riot? Locks fail. Guards are distracted. A man with the right connections can move freely." Joaquín turned to his men, spoke rapid Spanish. They cable-tied Morgan and the contractors efficiently, gagged them, dragged them into one of the empty cells. "They'll be found eventually, but not until we're finished. The victims," Tess gestured to the 7 people still huddled against the wall, "will come with us. We have a way out that doesn't require going through the riot zones." Joaquín addressed the captives in Spanish, his voice gentle, reassuring. Whatever he said made them relax slightly. The woman with the cross lowered it, nodded. They moved as a group now. Stella, Tess, Joaquín, 6 Los Fantasmas members, and 7 trafficking victims. Through corridors Stella hadn't known existed, using passages that predated even the hidden infrastructure Sutton had built. Grimstone was older than its newest wing, and its original construction had its own secrets. They emerged in the prison chapel, the one place in Grimstone considered truly neutral ground. Waiting there was Drake, along with old Vinny and Marcus Webb. Drake had his laptop open, connected to a satellite phone. "FBI tactical team is en route," Drake said. "ETA 20 minutes. I've transmitted everything. The photographs, the evidence, the victim statements. They're coordinating with local police to shut down the entire operation. Not just here, all 7 facilities in the network." "Donnelly?" Stella asked. "In his office, trying to manage the riot. He doesn't know about the victims yet. Doesn't know his operation is falling apart." Drake looked at Joaquín. "Your people did their job. The riot is contained but ongoing. Perfect distraction. And Sutton? Already arrested. FBI picked him up at his home 2 hours ago. He's talking, trying to cut a deal, giving up names, locations, everything." Drake's smile was grim. "When criminals start flipping on each other, the whole structure collapses." The chapel door burst open. Warden Donnelly entered, followed by 3 guards Stella didn't recognize, more of Sutton's contractors. Donnelly's face went through a rapid series of emotions as he took in the scene. Confusion, understanding, rage. "You've destroyed everything," he said, his voice shaking. "Not with fear, with fury. Years of careful work. Millions of dollars. All of it ruined by people who should have minded their own business." "Trafficking is everyone's business," Stella said. She pulled her father's compass from her shirt, held it up. "My father tried to stop you. You killed him for it. But you couldn't kill what he started." Donnelly stared at the compass, and something in his expression shifted. Recognition. James Archer. "I remember him. He was persistent, kept asking questions nobody wanted answered. We had to silence him. You just confessed to murder," Drake said. "In front of multiple witnesses, including an FBI agent recording every word." Donnelly lunged toward Drake, but Joaquín moved faster. Despite his age, despite his shackles, he intercepted Donnelly with the ease of a man who'd spent decades perfecting violence. One quick movement, and Donnelly was on the ground, Joaquín's knee on his back. "This is for every person you trafficked," Joaquín said quietly. "For every life you destroyed. For my daughter, who passed through your prison while you got rich off her suffering. The contractors with Donnelly made the mistake of reaching for their weapons. Los Fantasmas members disarmed them before they could draw. Within seconds, it was over. The entire corrupt operation, from warden to contractors to the system that enabled it, subdued in a prison chapel by a coalition of unlikely allies, FBI tactical teams arrived 18 minutes later, storming Grimstone with the authority to arrest anyone connected to the trafficking network. Stella watched through the chapel windows as agents spread through the facility, taking guards into custody, securing evidence, beginning the massive process of dismantling everything Donnelly and Sutton had built. Tess stood beside her, tears streaming down her face. "It's over." "It's really over." "Not quite over," Drake said. "Now comes the hard part. Trials, testimony, making sure everyone involved faces justice. But the operation is dead. No more victims will be trafficked through Grimstone or any of the other facilities." Stella held her father's compass, feeling its weight. The needle pointed north, as it always had. True and steady. Her father had started this fight. She'd finished it. The legacy he'd left her wasn't land or money. It was the courage to stand against evil, no matter the cost. The compass had pointed true, and so had she. 3 months later, Stella stood on the porch of her family's ranch in Wyoming, watching the sun rise over the mountains she'd missed every day she'd been away. The land stretched before her, 40 acres of grass and timber, the creek running silver through the valley, the peaks catching the early light and turning it gold. The foreclosure had been reversed, the fraudulent debts erased. Compensation from the lawsuit against Sutton Construction and the State Corrections Department had not only restored the ranch, but secured its future for generations. She held her father's compass, feeling the cool weight of it in her palm. The silver was worn smooth from decades of handling, first by him, then by her. The needle pointed north, as it always had, as it always would. Beautiful morning. Stella turned to see Tess climbing the porch steps, 2 mugs of coffee in her hands. Her friend, because that's what Tess had become, forged through fire and shared purpose, looked healthier than she had at Grimstone. Color in her face, peace in her eyes. The ghost of her murdered brother still haunted her, probably always would, but justice had brought a measure of healing. "You sleep okay?" Stella asked, accepting the coffee. "Better than I have in years." Tess leaned against the porch rail, looking out at the mountains. "I forget what silence sounds like. Real silence, not prison silence. There's a difference." "There is." They stood together, sipping coffee as the sun climbed higher. A red-tailed hawk circled overhead, hunting. The creek babbled its endless song. Somewhere in the distance, a neighbor's cattle lowed. The sounds of a life Stella had thought she'd lost forever. "The book deal came through," Tess said after a while. "My editor wants to start on revisions next month. Make sure the story hits all the right notes: human interest, heroism, the systematic failure that allowed trafficking to happen in plain sight. You'll do it justice. Your brother's story deserves to be told. All our stories do. Yours, Drake's, Joaquín's." Tess paused. "Speaking of which, I got a letter from him yesterday. He's been moved to minimum security in California, just like they promised. Says the food is terrible, but at least nobody's trying to kill him. He's teaching English to other inmates, leading a Bible study group of all things." Stella smiled. Joaquín Ramirez, the executioner, the man whose name had once made hardened criminals flinch, finding redemption in teaching and faith. The world was full of surprises. "Any word on his daughter?" she asked, though she knew Tess would have led with that news if there was any, still searching. "The FBI has a dedicated team, but the trail is years cold, and the network was extensive. But they haven't given up. Drake says they've recovered 47 victims from various locations across the country, and every one of them is a witness who might lead them to Isabella. They'll find her if she's alive to be found, and if she's not, then at least Joaquín will know. That's better than wondering." A truck appeared on the road, kicking up dust as it approached. Marcus Webb, Stella saw. He'd been visiting regularly since she'd returned to Wyoming, part of his attempt to honor the promise he'd made to her father. They'd talked through the manipulation, the orchestration, the impossible choices he'd made. Stella had forgiven him mostly. Trust was harder, but they were working on it. Webb climbed out of his truck, nodded to both of them. "Morning, ladies. Brought some news from Drake. The trials start next week. Donnelly, Morgan, 17 guards, 23 contractors, and 8 corrections officials across 4 states. The prosecution's case is airtight. physical evidence, victim testimony, financial records, and multiple confessions. How long will it take? Tess asked. Months, maybe longer. But the outcome isn't in doubt. Everyone involved is going to prison for a very long time. Webb looked at Stella. Drake wants to know if you'll testify. Of course, I figured. He also wanted me to ask if you'd considered joining the FBI afterward. Said they could use someone with your instincts and integrity. Stella looked out at her land, at the mountains, at the life she'd fought so hard to reclaim. I already have a job. Right here, raising cattle, fixing fence, living the life my father built. That's enough for me, fair enough. Though if you change your mind, the offer stands. Webb stayed for breakfast, eggs and bacon, coffee strong enough to strip paint, conversation that carefully avoided the darkness they'd survived together. When he left, promising to return next week with more updates, Stella felt the weight of it all settle on her shoulders. The trials would dredge up everything. The media would be relentless. Her privacy would be invaded, her father's memory dissected in public, her choices questioned by people who'd never faced what she'd faced. But it was necessary. Justice required witnesses. Truth required voices willing to speak it. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Stella sat on her porch with her father's photograph, him standing in front of the ranch house, that rare smile on his weathered face. She touched the glass gently. I finished it, she said to his memory. Your work, your investigation. I brought them all down, Donnelly, Sutton, everyone who was part of the trafficking network. I did what you couldn't, what you died trying to do. And I found out the truth about your death, about how they murdered you and tried to destroy your legacy. The wind picked up, rustling through the pine trees. It sounded almost like an answer. I'm home now, she continued. The ranch is safe. Your compass showed me the way back, just like you said it would. Always pointing true, even when I was lost. Especially when I was lost. She opened the compass, watched the needle settle north, steady, reliable, true. I understand now why you did what you did. Why you couldn't look away from injustice even when it was dangerous. Why you kept fighting even when you knew they might kill you for it. Because some things are worth the risk. Some battles have to be fought no matter the cost. Stella closed the compass, placed it on her chest, over her heart. I'm proud to be your daughter, Dad. I hope you're proud of me, too. The hawk circled again overhead, riding the thermal currents. The creek sang its endless song. The mountains stood eternal and patient, witnesses to everything that had transpired and everything yet to come. Stella closed her eyes, feeling the last warmth of the sun on her face. She'd traveled a dark and twisted path to get here, through manipulation and violence, through corruption and loss, through fear and determination. But she'd emerged on the other side stronger, clearer, more certain of who she was and what she stood for. The compass had pointed true, and she'd followed it home. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, testimony to prepare, healing to continue, a future to build. But tonight she was exactly where she needed to be, on her father's land, under his mountains, carrying his compass and his legacy. Sometimes life doesn't ask permission before it changes everything you thought you knew about yourself. But if you're lucky, if you're strong, if you follow what's true, you find your way home again. The mountains darkened as night fell. Stella went inside, carrying her father's photograph and compass, ready to face whatever came next. She was home. She was at peace. And she'd kept her promise. The compass always pointed true.